Friends to Inks and Issues, a podcast where we do in-depth discussions on a single comic book. I'm your host, the Reverse Vampire, Jonah Gregory.
And I'm Kieran, and got any candy?
And with us today, we have a special guest all the way over from Cthulhu and Friends. Veronica, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for letting me out of the darkness and into the light. Hi, guys.
So you went to Twitter and said, hey, what should we talk about when I'm on Inks and Issues? And we got a lot of stuff that we expected to get because it's you.
Yes.
And Cthulhu and Friends has a certain vibe, I would say.
A strong brand.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a horror bent. So we got pretty much all suggestions for horror comics, except for Brittany, who suggested Gem and the Holograms. So
I
someday,
did see that, and I was just like, well, that looks colorful.
It does. Look, it is good. I have read the first few issues of it back when it first launched, and it was pretty entertaining. So, but what we usually do, I should probably say, so we're talking about American Vampire today. But before we get into that, sometimes I forget to say what we're reviewing at the top of the show. And then 20 minutes in, I'm like, oh, by the way, we're talking about a comic book here on this comic book podcast. So Veronica, what, are you into comics at all? Or is this more of a, if someone recommends something, then you'll take a look sort of hobby for you?
So yeah, I enjoy comics occasionally.
Yeah.
One would say I'm a casual user.
Yeah.
I'm named after Veronica Lodge from the Archie comics.
Okay. We've talked about one Archie comic.
Yeah. So I grew up reading like classic Thor and Flash because that is what my cousin Bubba had. And so that's what I read.
I appreciate that your cousin's name is Bubba.
His name was Bubba? Like legitimately his name was Bubba?
No, that is not his given name.
Yeah.
I did not know his real name was not Bubba until I was maybe 13. And someone called him Gary. And I was like,
you're like, who's Gary?
Gary?
Who's this Gary person?
That's amazing.
So yeah, it was nuts. But no, I really do. I enjoy lots of comics, because Sam is really into them. And so he'll like say, oh, hey, this is really good. And you would like this one. And I 100% always do when he gives me a recommendation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He was on and he had very good taste in our opinions, I think, for what comics were good. I think we had similar taste in that regard.
Yeah, he has some excellent recommendations to give out.
Yeah. So you said before the show that you read a lot of Christian comics as a kid. Were those specifically the Archie Christian variants that I only found out about recently?
No.
Okay.
There's
that's
so
a thing
much
that
more.
I did not know that was a thing until about a week ago.
There's so many pure comics out there that are just aimed to keep you a virgin for many, many years. And
so like standard Marvel stuff. Hey, comic book jokes.
What?
From 20 years ago? Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I used to go to Sunday school, and you would like take out each like little, you got to like do this perforated thing, and you stapled your own comic book together, and that was your activity, and you could color it if you wanted to, but it was in like the bubble style of comic books. And so it was all just based on that week's lesson of what Moses maybe did or didn't do, and why that means you need to keep it in your pants.
Okay. I was wondering, I was going to ask if it was Bible tales specifically.
Yeah, I was curious as to whether they were like Bible stories in comic forms, or if they were like, Adventures of Ralphie the Wacky Christian or something like.
Well, those are more Halloween-esque Christian comics. So when you are feeling the need to go out and be an evildoer, there's lots of good comics for that too. And what happens when you sin too much?
Oh no, too much candy when you're on
too
Halloween.
Much. Oh yeah, it's too bad. You're going to go straight to hell. Just so you know. Don't overindulge in anything.
Good to have that confirmed. I'm going to hell like 700 times.
Yes.
Well, the comic we're talking about today, not super Christian, I would say. There is a cross at one point, but then the vampire has to make a snide comment about it. So
of course he does.
Yes.
So we're talking about American Vampire, and Kieran, do you have some fun facts for us about American Vampire?
I do, but before I get into those, as you said, we took to Twitter to kind of basically crowdsource our episode. And I'm curious, Veronica, why did you pick, of all the suggestions, of which there are many, why did you pick American Vampire?
Oh, I love vampires. I would 100% be a vampire in any iteration. I would even be a Nosferatu type vampire. I think it's legit cool. Better than almost any superpower except teleportation.
I was just about to say, except for teleportation, because as we all know, it's the best superpower.
That just reminded me of the, I think it was a tweet. It's usually a tweet where someone was like, oh, I'm a werewolf. I can turn into a giant wolf. And then his friend is like, hey, I'm a vampire. I can turn into a giant dog and a bat and mist. And and I'm super pretty all the time. And he's like, shut up.
Don't take your dreams to Twitter. Just don't take your dreams to Twitter. That's the real lesson there.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, vampires are OP. They need to be nerfed in 2.0 is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I do have a couple fun facts about this one. So American Vampire was originally began publication in March 17, 2010. So a little while ago. And it was written by, interestingly enough, Scott Snyder, who did basically like the A story for this volume that we're doing, which is issues 1 to 5. Mm-hmm. And then interestingly enough, the secondary story, is written by Stephen King,
Who's that?
You may have, I mean, he's a little known writer, from,
I think he's mostly known for his cocaine usage, right?
Right.
Well, yes.
In the 80s.
Yeah. He was into it.
Yeah, he was real into it. He was the standard for the time. So the secondary story was written by Stephen King, which was actually his first original comic work.
Interesting.
He'd done comics. There are comics based on his stuff, but this was the first thing that he had written that was an original story for comics, which I thought was quite interesting. And Scott Snyder he's been on the show before. He has written a lot of Batman. He wrote DC Metal, which we covered a little while ago, and he has American Vampire, also one of his more well-known stories. And he's also done a lot of other superhero things as well, and Witches as well, which is a series I've heard a lot of good things about. And the story was drawn by, and I'm gonna bugger this one up, Raphael
Albuquerque.
Albuquerque, that's what I was thinking, but I didn't want to go in there and be like, yeah, okay. Raphael Albuquerque. He's a Brazilian comic book artist who gained a lot of attention for his work on Blue Beetle, and was then sort of brought over to work on a lot of other sort of Western comics, and that ended up with him working on American Vampire with Scott Snyder. And American Vampire actually won the 2011 Eisner Award and the 2011 Harvey Award for the best new series. The series really went off with a big old hiss and a roar. And of course, like every other sort of mildly successful comic property out there are rumors that it's going to be adapted into a TV show or a movie or a miniseries or whatever. Mm-hmm. Is it actually going to be? Who knows? Last update was 2006 or something.
Right. I was going to say there's quotes from Neil Gaiman saying, he doesn't, even when something has been optioned and he has the check in hand, he still doesn't believe it until he's sitting in the movie theater watching it, because he's had so many projects optioned and so few of them go anywhere. And, that's the reason Alan Moore took that money for, optioning Watchmen, was because he's no one's going to ever make this. I'll just cash this check and it'll be fine. Exactly.
Oopsies. And now a movie, a video game, and a TV series later, he's like, I fucking hate this.
But I mean, there's got to be a part of him that's laughing all the way to the bank, right?
You would think so.
One would hope. One would hope.
So those are your fun facts.
All right. Right on. So let's jump in then. So issue 1 is titled Big Break, and we start in July of 1925, 30 miles east of Los Angeles. An automobile containing numerous devoured bodies meets a hooded figure in the desert. The hooded figure casts the bodies into a ravine. One of the bodies is Pearl Jones, who is barely alive. 3 days earlier, aspiring actress Pearl Jones and Haiti Hargrove returned to their shared boarding room after a day of work on the set. They notice a man named Skinner Sweet who has been hanging around for the last 3 days. Later, as Pearl heads from her night job to her morning job, she works how many jobs? I think it said like 3 or
3.
Okay, I was going to say somewhere like 3 to 5. I knew it's a lot of
sort of
jobs.
range.
Musician Henry Preston meets Pearl and eventually gets her to agree to a date. And he uses the don't ever do this method of harassing her until she says yes. Kids, don't ever do that.
Yeah,
That's
never
bad.
do this.
Back at her acting gig, Pearl gets to stand in to do the lighting like they do with a big movie star, Chase Hamilton, who invites her to a party being thrown by big-time movie producer B.D. Bloch. On their way to the party, Pearl and Hattie are harassed by Sweet, who is sitting by the pool again. He just always seems to be hanging out there, being a creepazoid.
He likes to swim.
Yeah, he advises Pearl to skip Bloch's party and says he's in town to finish a bit of business with Bloch. What could that be? At the party, Hamilton takes Pearl into a room and presents her to Bloch and his associates, all of whom are vampires. And it ends with Pearl being attacked by a giant group of vampires. So that's where that's left off. All right, so that's the end of the first issue main story. The backup stories tie in, but we'll get to that in a second. So,
yeah.
Veronica, was this your first time reading this, or was it like...
Yeah, it was. Which is,
I wasn't sure if this was one you were familiar with or not.
No, it's insane. I curated this huge comic book collection for the local library that I used to work at like 3 or 4 years ago. And this was one of the ones I was like, oh, we have to have this. This is so important. And I never did read it.
Oh,
I read, I got volume 4, which is a very beautiful and pretty cover. And I was like, oh, I'll read this. And I got like through the whole thing and I was like, I don't know what the fuck is happening.
Yeah.
Like this is very strange.
The 4th volume into a story.
Yeah. So
what was your first thoughts on this first part, Big Break, this intro section?
Well, I was really interested to see the type of vampire that they were going to create together, because there's a whole genre of vampires that you get to choose from. And so it was really interesting to see that they are the lower jaw coming undone vampires.
Right.
I thought that was super cool. We still don't know anything about, what any weaknesses they have are. But I thought that was a really cool mutation. They've also got these like crazy long claws, which is something that I had not seen, or something I guess that's not really seen in, not Nosferatu type vampires. So I thought that was very cool.
Yeah. Kieran, thoughts on this first section?
I really enjoyed the first part of this of this story. I think probably the thing that like drew me in the most and kind of continued to do so is I really like Pearl as as a character. I especially as I've read more things, I am more interested in stories that do not, basically, to be explicit, they do not center around just milquetoast, straight, cis white guys. So the fact that it is a working woman in the 1920s who is the main character of this story, I found that to be quite interesting. And so like her kind of journey through all of this, I wanted to keep like reading I knew that something horrible was going to happen to her.
Right.
But there was a part of me that was like, oh, but if I keep reading, somehow it won't.
Right.
That didn't come true. It didn't really come true. But, I think it's a sign of good writing where you know it's going to happen. Like the ending of this part is totally telegraphed. But you still hope for the best outcome.
Yeah. The tropey thing of like, oh, you see the character die and then you get introduced to them essentially. Like I was like, they made me like this. They're making me like this character just so they can kill her off. And I was kind of annoyed by that, but I'm like, but there's gotta be more to it, or else why would they spend an entire issue like just setting up this really interesting character? So but we'll get into that more as it goes. So do we want to hop into the backup story then? because there's a lot to cover. That's why I'm trying to keep things moving. Sorry if I feel like I'm cutting things a little short, but so the second part is Bad Blood, which is the backup story by Stephen King in the back. And this is told from the perspective of Will Bunting, who is a writer living in 1925, and he's recounting events that occurred in 1880. There, Bunting, as a younger man, is present as an outlaw named Skinner Sweet, which, that ties in he's the guy that keeps hanging out at the pool.
That's the guy at the pool.
I know. He's being taken by train to be hanged. Sweet and his associates, Ronnie Jeeks and the Blackmouth twins, have robbed a bank on of the sun-sensitive Mr. Percy. They keep talking about this sunscreen stuff that he needs to wear. Very unsuspicious.
Interesting.
He's also retained by the Pinkerton Agency, so he's bad just from that alone.
Yeah.
Also on the train are some other characters that are important to various degrees. James Book, the Pinkerton agent who captured Sweet, Agent Finch, who's Book's boss, and Felix Camillo, a young, nervous deputy whose father had turned in Sweet in the first place. So after a daring train wreck and escape involving his gang and a peppermint stick, Sweet tells Book that he sent Book's fiancée a really nasty vintage bottle of wine. So, poisoning someone's wife, classic outlaw move. Mr. Percy confronts Sweet and company, who pepper him with gunfire to no effect. Percy, clearly a vampire, bites Skinner. Skinner is able to push him off and shoots him in the head, and in the process, a drop of blood from Percy lands in Skinner's eye. And shortly after, Percy slashes Skinner's throat with his razor-sharp fingers. The survivors leave Sweet for dead, as a smile creeps across his face, and that's where we're left with, is them going, "Welp, we killed Sweet. That's the end of that."
Let's just leave him here.
We are good guys.
Yes, we are good at our jobs. So, backup story. V, what did you think of the backup?
I wasn't excited about it, to
be
totally honest. No. I do not like this, hogwashy sunscreen bit. It is so lame. I'm not into it at all. And I was really upset to have seen it come through so quickly. I was like, oh my God, this is a person that I look up to so much as a writer. And it's such a letdown for me. I do like, on the other hand, that King brings in a really good essence of Latin culture and Hispanic culture to the Wild West, which is largely ignored in so much of pop culture. And so it's really cool to see, like, from the get-go, there are, Anglo-Americans, and there are also these Mexican-Americans, and they are integrated in doing things together. And I thought that was a really strong thing to bring to the first issue.
Yeah, that just reminded me, I did see something recently, and I don't know why it came up, but it was about how most people you think of as the traditional cowboy were more likely Mexican American or Latin American immigrants, because those were the jobs they were finding when they came over, were like the farm hands and stuff and the ranch hands and whatnot. So I thought that was really interesting, the whole, like, traditional whitewashing that America loves to do in its pop culture. So, yeah, I know.
Would
Shocker,
they do
right?
that?
They're pretty trustworthy. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, I did like the idea of this backup story, how it is like some of the same characters, but you see them earlier. But yeah, you're right. The sunscreen thing was super hokey. Like, because if they could have some sort of like magical sunscreen that works, like, that kind of ruins kind of the point of the sun thing. I don't know. And like, why don't they have it later?
Yeah.
They do bring it up later.
Yeah.
But it is done kind of stupidly because the Mr. whatever the hell his name is, the fat vampire who wears the sunscreen,
His
basically
name
says
is
to all the other.
Percy.
Percy.
Sorry, Percy. So Percy the vampire basically says to, oh God, all the other vampires later about the sunscreen. He's like, if only you would all wear my sunscreen, then we could all go out in the sun. And it's like, okay, so you're all just too proud and stupid to use this magic thing that will let you go in the sun. That's just dumb. Like, it was. I liked the change of pace to the B story to go from like this kind of 1920s, film thriller horror kind of thing, to like a Wild West kind of escapade.
It does definitely have its own pacing, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed the change, but yeah, like the sunscreen thing and like having all these new characters and then immediately like there were multiple characters all then immediately in danger. It was just like, okay, whatever. Like,
you don't really care about most of them until near the end of this volume. So yeah, I'm wondering if the backup story would actually benefit from a reread. Like once you actually are familiar with who most of these characters are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Kieran, do you want to take issue 2 for us then?
I shall. So issue 2, a story is Morning Star, 1925. Henry Preston and Hattie Hargrove find a bloodied and bitten Pearl wandering the desert. At the hospital, the doctor doesn't give Pearl much hope for life. But later in the morgue, Skinner Sweet climbs in the window, bites his lip, draws blood, and kisses Pearl's eye, which was super nasty.
Gross.
Thereby turning her into a vampire. Pearl makes it back to the house where Sweet is waiting for her. He breaks the news of her death to her and explains that they are an evolved type of vampire, different than the aristocratic or European vampires who attempted to prey on them. One big difference is that the sun has no effect on Skinner or Pearl. Skinner departs but leaves Pearl a gift in her closet. A tied-up Chase Hamilton who originally led Pearl to slaughter by B.D. Block and other vampires. A furious Pearl transforms into a razor-clawed vampire, kills Hamilton, and leaves him in his dressing room. And God, it was so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I really enjoyed that particular bit. So, Jonah, what do you think of the second part of the main story?
Well, I did like that we got Pearl out of the whole she's dead situation because, like I said, that she's likable right off the bat in the first issue. So, like, she's got to be. This has to be going somewhere. Like, if they were just setting her up just to actually kill her off, I would have been really annoyed and turned off to reading the rest of the comic, I think. But the fact that she becomes the main character in this second issue more so, because I was like, oh, it's going to just end up being Sweet because he's clearly the vampire and blah, blah, blah. But he kind of remains a secondary character for the most part, which I did like that. And, you know, the comeuppance for Chase Hamilton, who turned her over to the vampires, was very nice. It was chef's kiss, as you were saying.
As the kids say.
Veronica, thoughts on this one?
So what I was going to say was I actually was not terrified to read issue 1 because I like the idea of being turned into a vampire. That seems cool as shit. So for me, I was like, oh, she's about to get totally turned. A, she's on the cover. B, obviously this is going somewhere good. So I was so excited. The thing that kind of creeped me out was, and what I liked was that Skinner was turned into a vampire because he had like some kind of eye droplet blood thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that he thought that that's how you turn people into vampires, was to inject them through the eye, which comes up later in the story as well. Right. But I thought that was a pretty interesting, take, because we're actually watching this vampire who has no leader, no one to help him, no one to mentor him in the ways of the night. And so, really watching him kind of do his first turn was super cool.
Yeah, it was interesting because like he doesn't know he knows he's different, but he doesn't really know how yet. Right. Is a big part of the story.
Yeah. He leaves her a little note, kind of like summarizing like some of the things about like the European vampires and then some of the stuff about them. But in the section for about them, he's like, yeah, you'll figure it out. And it's like, you don't actually know.
Right. Do you? Exactly.
And you just don't want to say.
Yep.
I dumb. You don't need to know that.
He has to act like he's got it all figured out.
Exactly. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought I think the idea of kind of like these new sort of like evolved vampires being vampires, but like just being slightly different and having like a different mythology applied to them, I really dug. Because I like vampires, but often I find a lot of the stuff like around them where like, you know, they can't go out in the sun, the garlic and the crosses and blah, blah, blah. I find a lot of that to be kind of like, whatever. Like, I've seen it before. But this I hadn't seen before. So I was really like super drawn in. And of particular note, I love that when they look at themselves in the mirror, it's not that they don't have a reflection. It's that the reflection's really fucked up and like all wavy looking.
It looks like a funhouse mirror.
Yeah, it was fucking dope
that was
as hell.
cool.
I really like that.
I thought that was a really. Go ahead. Sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, I was just going to say, and when Pearl goes like full vampire and like, you know, the jaw unhinged and she gets the claws, it's such a good piece of art. It's like, it's such a power moment, like for her that I'm like, oh yeah, he's fucked.
Yeah.
So one of the things I thought was really interesting, in the way that they depicted the mirror, I'm so glad you brought that up. You know, because so often it's, you know, oh, well, vampires have no reflection, but it's supposed to really make you reflect on what you and society are. So they have no reflections, but they reflect what we are at our worst or at our best. So I thought that was really interesting because I will think like, oh, it's a really good vampire if, you know, it reflects on society and on, you know, what it means to be human. I think that's such a cool thing. And for us, like, no one sees who they really are in the mirror. It's all just this completely distorted thing. So when they're looking in the mirror, they're only seeing like, this crazy, weird thing. And that's all what we think. I mean, like, I would love to meet the person that has the self-esteem to look in the mirror and be like, oh yeah, you are doing it today. You've got it all together.
Yeah.
So I thought that was such a good interpretation of the vampire reflecting the culture.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I did not think of it that way because you've clearly thought about vampires in a much deeper way than I ever have. And I'm digging it. I'm here for that. I never really understood the like no reflection thing, but that's a really cool way to look at it. Like, I just thought it was a superpower because I'm dumb.
And you don't need to know it.
All right. Do we want to jump into that?
All right.
Backup?
So in our backup, Deep Water, Will Bunting, narrating from 1925, continues to recount the events he witnessed in 1880. After the train wreck and a fight with Skinner, James Book falls into a coma for 4 days and later awakens to the news that Sweet murdered his fiancée with poisoned wine. Book, Felix Camilo, and Bunting head to Cruces to pay their respect. Mr. Percy and his European vampire associates begin to dam the nearby river, thereby putting the town and Sweet's grave underwater. Years later, scavengers from Lakeview, a nearby town, go diving to steal items from Sweet's grave, only to find he is very much still hungry.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun. So what I would like to point out and talk about for just a second here is the art is actually different for the main story and the backup story. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think of that kind of difference?
I liked both of them, honestly. Like, they both were cool. They are, I think, similar enough that it's not like jarring until it gets to scenes like this, where you really notice there's a lot of difference in the style of their faces are more detailed in this version. Like when we see Sweet go full crazy unhinged jaw, you know, underwater vampire, it's way more detailed than anything in the main story arc. So I think it was a cool way to kind of enhance that the story in the past was, I don't know. It's I don't know if I even want to say weaker. I guess that's fair. It's a little weaker than the main story. I'm just going to lay that out there.
You can say that. You're allowed.
I just wasn't sure if that was my actual opinion or, you know, but yeah, I think it's a little weaker, but it is also an origin story. And so it's interesting. Like I'm not sad that they were there. I wasn't like, oh, this again when they would pop up or anything like that. But, I did like this scene in particular that you were talking about underwater. Well, for one, it had like the first really stupid one-liner where he's like, hello, motherfuckers, got any candy? To the guys that are digging him out. It's
so dumb. And but like, I kind of like it. I kind of like it.
There are some really dumb one-liners, and it's not just in those parts; it's in the modern parts too. So it's consistent. But I liked how they were already showing like, hey, this guy is a vampire now, but he's different because they flood the town because they're bound by water. It's that whole like they can't cross moving water. Isn't that like, I don't know why that's a thing, but that is a thing.
Yeah,
right?
he's like he won't be able to move within the water. Like so I think.
That comes from, so that's more of an old timey, I want to say that's from like a Penny Dreadful type thing, or it might actually be Dracula. I'm not 100% where the origin on that is, but it is that the vampire has to sleep in their own soil and their own grave. So that's kind of why they usually don't cross oceans and things, because you have to be, that's why it's crazy that a European vampire would be in America, something like that in other stories. That's not necessarily the thing they went with here.
Right.
Okay. Well, they do mention that he should be bound in the water, but he's not. So that's like a big change over the, so they are definitely playing on the running water thing. It sounds like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed the backup, and I think the art in both stories is very good, and the difference is like it's not too different to kind of be jarring when you go from one to the other, but there is enough of a difference that you can be like, okay, now we're in a different time, a different place, and we're telling a different story.
Right.
And I totally forgot to say this at the start, but the colors are by Dave McCaig, and he did a very good job.
Oh yes. Excellent job. Like the underwater scene, especially, I thought was incredibly interesting. The way that the way he tinted everything to give you that feel of like claustrophobia, like when the guys are diving and stuff.
Yeah. It looks very, very cool.
Also, the old timey diving suit is always one of those things that I love the design of, because it's so goofy. It's like people actually used these. That's so weird.
Science. So to let you guys know that I am not crazy, attentive to things like that, I did not notice a change in art at all. Okay. I was like, I didn't even, I was like going back and looking, and I was just like, oh yeah, I guess so. But I guess if that's something that you're into and looking for, then that makes total sense. But it was seamless for me.
That's good. Yeah. All right. Veronica, do you want to take issue 3?
Absolutely not. It makes me want to throw up just thinking about it. But I also love to throw up. So here we go.
Then we're in luck.
Okay, so this is issue 3, Rough Cut. It is 1925. Pearl goes back to her old boarding house and tells Hattie she's not safe and needs to leave. The European vampires discuss what to do about Sweet after their discovery of Chase Hamilton's corpse. Okay, so I have heard both of you say this last name, Bloch and Block, and I thought it was Blosh. I just thought
it was Bloch because he's a vampire and kind of has blotchy skin. So I thought it was like,
sense.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yes, okay.
That was my understanding. Like, I'm terrible at pronouncing names, but that's what I'm going with.
I think it should be Bloch because he's also trying to get the sweet, sweet cream on everybody too.
That's true.
Alrighty then. Let's go with Bloch. That's way better.
Beatty Bloch admits that Sweet's weaknesses are unknown to them, and Lucia, a female vampire, reminds him that they know that he rests during the moonless time. Bloch. What did we say? Bloch? Yeah, Bloch. Sorry. Bloch sends 2 vampires, Edgar and Lucia, to Pearl's house to, quote, clean up the mess. On their way, they are ambushed by Pearl, who literally rips off Edgar's face.
That was a weird scene.
Kills him with a stake, and then kills Lucia via cactus. So totally Wild West. Pearl later tells her story to Henry Preston, who is skeptical. Okay. Pearl begins to feel weak as the moonless night descends. She gets a call from Bloch, who has captured Hattie and persuades Pearl to meet them at the big sign on the hill. Pearl
Which I'm
Ditch's
guessing is the Hollywood sign?
I guess. Who can know these things? But wait, it's 1925. That didn't exist yet.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, when did they make the Hollywood land
Well, I
sign?
mean, this is an alternative universe, so maybe they put it up in like 1915 or something.
I don't know that this is an alternative universe.
I mean, this is a biography.
Sorry, no, you're right. I do apologize. It is this universe. This is canon.
Pearl ditches Preston and leaves alone to confront Blotch. So that's the A story, y'all.
Yeah.
Damn.
Can I say that it got goofy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, 100%. You can.
It got goofy. She rips a guy's face off. Like, have you ever seen the movie Face Off? She takes his face off.
Oh, like the movie.
Yeah,
Face
like
Off.
that movie. And then she has to explain, because they want to make sure the audience knows that the cactuses are like, the spikes are made of wood essentially, so that when she stabs the other vampire into it, it can legitimately kill them without people being like, but that's a cactus, not a tree. It's not made out of pine wood, which you said was more effective for some reason. I'm not sure what the rationale between pine specifically is, but maybe they don't like
have to read more to find out.
Yeah, maybe they don't like pine tar. They're allergic.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we get some good action sequences. This was kind of like, to me anyway, this part, I was just kind of like, okay, you need to kill some of these people, get them out of the way so we can move on. Because like the cool action sequences that are just vampires fighting, I'm more interested in like the lore and the story part. So at least me personally, I was like, yeah, that's cool. Whatever. Let's move on. I don't know. What did you guys think?
I really enjoyed when it got kind of goofy.
Okay.
And
that's totally fair.
She was like riding on a motorcycle alongside their car, and, you know, like she jumps over, rips the driver out of the car, tears open the roof, rips off Edgar's face, and then it just goes careening off a cliff. And Edgar's like crawling out of the car with no face, desperately trying to like put up an umbrella. And then, you know, they have this like badass fight, shoves her into a cactus and like quips as she walks away. I was like, hell yeah, this is it's like a revenge film, but the lady getting the revenge is a vampire with giant claws. And, you know, I respect a woman who can
rip your face off. Okay.
Can rip my face off and crash a car and then put another woman into a cactus. And it's very stupid.
Yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong. It's very stupid.
But in a good way.
I liked it.
Yeah.
I thought it was also fun.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a really good take on an expensive fight scene in a blockbuster film, right? I was just like, oh, great. This is so much fun. And if you can imagine someone like getting staked on a cactus and they're like looking down like, no, you know, like, oh, I never expected a cactus.
I prepared for everything except this. The scene where he's crawling around with no face does remind me a lot of, there's a scene in Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe where he's killing Wolverine and like shoots a shotgun in his face. And so it's just like his exposed skull. And I think that's where some of the goofiness came from for me. I couldn't unsee that. So that's
Punisher.
just me.
Yeah. It was goofy for sure.
It was goofy.
But it was good goofy.
I did enjoy that she becomes weaker during the moonless nights. I thought that was like an interesting kind of thing. And it doesn't really get explained like too much more in this kind of volume, but I'm curious to see like kind of where that goes in like future volumes.
Well, this is the first we see of them having weaknesses, right? Because they've only showed like, oh, they have all these strengths over a traditional vampire. Yeah. And then we're seeing the first of I think 2 weaknesses that are introduced in this volume.
Yeah.
So I did dig that.
All right. Do you guys want the B story?
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, do it.
This is called Blood Vengeance. It is 1909. Skinner Sweet awakens, realizing he's been underwater for more than 20 years. After raiding a candy store to satisfy his sweet tooth, Sweet lays waste to residents of Lakeview, Colorado. Oh, finally, a location. Mr. Percy and his vampire associates note Skinner's reappearance and summon Jeeks and the Blackmouth twins, who are now in the employ of Mr. Percy. While Sweet is confronted by his old enemies, Agent Finch, now the police chief, and Hector Camillo, now the mayor, Sweet blows Finch up with a stick of dynamite and beheads the elder Camillo. James Book, Felix Camillo, and Camillo's daughter Benita head from Arizona to Lakeview after losing contact with the town. The story ends with Jeeks and the Blackmouth twins following Sweet to an old mine shaft in which they had previously hidden money. Sweet has hung Hector Camillo's head on a tree outside the mine shaft.
Damn.
Yeah.
I'm going to be straight up with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
This was some Vampire Wild West bullshit, and I was very here for it.
Me too. Hashtag same.
Yeah. I was very curious where you're going with that, because I'm like, if you were about to say this did nothing for me, I'm like, oh, this is where I thought it finally got good.
Yeah.
Nothing is sweeter than vengeance, and
It's true.
this was given to us by Skinner Sweet himself. So,
Yes. Also, I did think it was a little on the nose to name him Sweet, but maybe that's a nickname. They never say that it's his Christian name.
It's his Bubba.
Yes, exactly. I dug the Wild West stuff a lot in this, and I love the scene where he's just figuring out like food isn't going to be food for him anymore, but he just is eating like barrelfuls of candy to try and satiate his hunger. And for some reason, a vampire hunched over like a giant thing of candy and just like shoving candy in his mouth. I don't know. It definitely did something for me.
Other than boots.
What was that?
Mm-hmm.
He was completely nude other than his boots as well.
Oh, okay. So no one stole his
he's
boots when
completely
he was
nude,
killed?
squatting in a candy store, just shoveling licorice into his mouth.
I mean, we've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah. Hashtag same.
I'm there now. I have a licorice here.
Oh, wow. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, it has so many of the, like, Western tropes, like, you know, like it has, you know, he's got the dynamite and he found the explosives and let's get a posse together and, oh no, the sheriff's been hit with the dynamite. And then he sends a telegram and they all ride out on their horses, but there are also vampires.
Right.
And he's like cutting arms off and stuff. So it's like this, you know, very well done, I thought, fusion of like two different genres. And it's one of those things where it's like on paper, you're like, wow, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Like, that seems it seems really stupid, but it actually kind of works.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree with you. I knew nothing of this comic. Like I probably have heard the name because, you know, it's won awards and whatnot, but like I didn't know the plot at all. So I was not expecting that half of it would be a Western. But the other thing that's kind of cool is it shows how short of a time span it went from like the Wild West to like Hollywood being a thing. You know, it's like, it's within a matter of what, like 20 years or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. Something like 20, 30 years.
Yeah. It's kind of cool to see how quickly things transition in the story. Cause it starts in 1880,
I think.
Yeah. So it's not that long. Yeah. Like 30 years. And I thought that was a really cool thing to see, just the march of time. And like when he comes out of the water, it's like there's a bunch of people he knew that were human that are still alive because it hasn't really been that long. And then he jumps ahead to one of the characters that's from the Wild West timeline is an old man. Sure. But like he's still alive and this stuff happened to him. He wrote it. That's actually kind of the thing that kind of ties these together. It's him as an author telling the story of like, okay, here's the book I wrote as a fiction book, but it's actually nonfiction. It's kind of the whole point of that secondary story arc with the old version of book.
Yeah, I think that this plays off of any of the current timeline. So the one that we're in, right? So we have Dracula's published in like the 1880s or 90s or something. But that doesn't actually even get like a lot of acclaim. It doesn't become a bestseller. No one reads that. But what's interesting is Nosferatu was made, and it just basically took the story of Dracula. They made the film Nosferatu, and then Bram Stoker's wife sued them, and it was just like, yo, this is my husband's story. He's dead. You can't do this. And basically she won. And so no one saw Nosferatu for the longest time until it was brought to America, which is so interesting because the writer, being a person that maybe has read Dracula or has seen, the silent film, all of this stuff, he has all of this knowledge of what, the European thought is on vampirism. So I thought that was a super cool thing. And I was just like, oh man, where are we? And is this supposed to be real? And, is it supposed to be kind of like the rise of the American vampire period for us?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I actually heard on another show I listened to that Nosferatu was actually, they ordered all the copies destroyed. So the only reason there's even copies of it was because people hid it. And we're like, oh yeah, no, I totally destroyed that copy at my theater. So basically piracy is the only reason that movie survived, which is kind of insane.
It's insane because it's the only reason that vampires being killed by sunlight is even a part of our folklore.
Oh,
because Dracula was not, he was like sun sensitive, but not a big deal. He could walk out in the daylight, no problem. But it was not until Nosferatu was actually released that people were just like, oh, all vampires, just the sun destroys them. And it was such a strong narrative that when Stoker's, I think, son, his son wrote The Daughter of Dracula, there's a foreword that talks about, oh yeah, retcon, sunlight totally kills vampires.
Oh, okay.
It was so huge. I was like, oh, God, that's so crazy.
Yeah, I did not know that. That's really interesting.
Vampires, am I right?
Yeah, they're crazy. All right, let's jump into issue 4 then, and I'll take that one. Issue 4, the main story is Double Exposure. Back in 1925, Pearl arrives at the Hollywood sign. So it is the Hollywood sign, okay? So it's the big sign, according to this. So Pearl arrives at the Hollywood sign as arranged with B.D. Blotch. Blotch gives up Hattie and tells Pearl he plans to take her back to his home and find out what can harm her. A fight erupts on the hillside, and Henry Preston comes to Pearl's rescue in a car, and they eventually make their escape. Suddenly, Hattie stabs Pearl in the back with a knife, literally stabs her in the back, and reveals that she was the hooded figure from the first scene of the first issue. So, dun dun dun, can get inserted there. In the morning, Pearl's exhausted from the moonless night and is forced to feed on Preston's blood. Pearl's situation begins to overwhelm her, but Preston says that she has to confront the European vampires and can't keep running away. Preston reveals that he is a Marine and tells Pearl he's with her on the fight against the old world vampires. And that is the A story.
So, I Googled it while you were talking. The Hollywood sign was erected in 1923 and originally said Hollywood Land.
Yes.
Yes.
I knew that because of that movie.
Correct.
Hollywood Land.
And I thought it was Hollywood. So,
Oh, I like when the person changed it to Hollyweed. But he defaced it in a way that didn't actually damage the sign. So everyone could have a good laugh. And, they just had to take down some sheets he had wrapped around parts of it.
Oh, good
That's
for
the
him.
best. That's the best kind of vandalism, where it's hilarious and doesn't actually cause property damage.
Yes. Listen, kids.
Yeah, if you're gonna deface the Hollywood sign and make it say Hollyweed, learn from the master.
Yeah.
Which is whoever that guy was.
Not that Banksy bastard. Just kidding. JK.
God, what a jerk.
Please come to my house.
Yeah.
Please come to our house.
Just maybe you guys have a similar thing, but anytime we see any kind of graffiti anywhere, my friends and I have to say, oh, it's a Banksy. But
well, I will now.
Banksy's done it again. Every time. All right. So, Veronica, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Oh, yeah, I didn't really have a whole lot.
You can say no, and I'll kick it to Kieran instead.
Oh, no.
Okay. Hey, Kieran, do you want to kick us off with the story? What are your thoughts on it?
No.
Okay, I'll kick us off then.
No, I'm kidding. I can take it. I can take it. Yeah, I will say, out of all the issues, like for the main story, I think that this one's probably the weakest. I still enjoyed it, but I think it's the weakest, like, just because Hattie betraying Pearl, like, it was a nice twist, and I was like, and you know, when I read it, I was like,
how she twisted the knife in her back.
Exactly, exactly.
We got Shyamalan, and then we got Shyamalan again.
Yeah, so like at the time, I was like, oh, interesting. Okay, all right. But it just like it didn't quite land for me that was like the big kind of like, and she's actually betraying her. I do not. I say this often. I don't know how it could have been done any better. But it just didn't quite fit for me. And then she essentially is betrayed, and then she just kind of fights for a bit and then runs away. So you know, it was fine. Is really what I'm saying here. I still liked it, but
yeah, I didn't like it because I like Hattie before this, and I'm like, I don't know. She just was like her friend, and you can't have your character have a friend, I guess. You're not allowed to have two female characters who are just friends that get along and help each other, I guess, when it's a man writing your story. So,
or there's only enough jobs for one of us. Oh, boy.
Yeah, so I didn't like it in that regard. Like, I don't think that was necessary to have her be like, oh, this hooded figure was her the whole time. I don't know. It didn't do anything for me.
Now that you mention it, I think that was my problem with it. Because there's actually, like, just flicking back through it, there's actually a little thing at the start of the issue where Pearl is working at a diner where she has to always say, have a happy egg of a day, every time she gives someone their meal. And I was like, that's the most American thing I've ever seen. And there's like a nice scene where they meet for the first time, and Hattie gives Pearl, a movie ticket, I think it is. Yeah. A movie ticket. And she's like, look, you know, you helped me out the other day when I couldn't pay. And then Pearl invites Hattie to come with her to the movies, and like they can hang out and be friends and stuff like that. So I think maybe it just felt a little cheap to have that relationship kind of built up and then a little bit of backstory just to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 pages later, have her literally stab her in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't think that there was enough build into that character at all. She was just really cheaply built, and I think it was a placeholder for any other thing that could have happened. Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't care for it.
No, I think she could have become a more interesting character over time had they not made her like the betrayer. She could be kind of like the human confidant that kind of helps her work through stuff or something, but...
Listen, Jonah, she's already got Henry Peterson.
God, I don't care about Henry Peterson. He's like the most bland character. I always forget.
A white man is already there for her. She doesn't need anyone else.
He has a guitar.
Anyway, here's Wonderwall. So do you want to take one drop of blood?
God, he would be though. He would be that person.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Justice for Hattie is what I'm saying.
Actually, and also like when she says, she asks her why. She says, because I'm not like you, I don't have what you have. I'm not good at the tough parts, but I am good at making new friends. So it's like she sells her out for this career, and yeah, I don't know. It just didn't buy it.
Maybe we're just not the showbiz type. Maybe we don't get it.
Exactly. Maybe we're not sociopaths.
We're better friends.
Don't worry, guys. I would never sell either of you out to vampires for greater podcast success. Don't worry.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hold you to that.
No, I want you to. Because I feel like I've really been building up to this for 3 issues now.
So the backup the backup story in this one is One Drop of Blood, and we're back in 1909. Book, Bunting, and Felix and Benita Camillo arrive at the devastated city of Lakeview. Bunting tells them his suspicion that Mr. Percy is a vampire and must have infected Sweet. But he can't figure out why Sweet is unaffected in the sunlight. Jeeks and the Blackmouth twins are still outside the mine shaft. Sweet has been holed up in for 2 days, and they get ambushed by Book and Bunting. Inside the mineshaft, Sweet notices his fangs are gone. His skin has become soft again, and attributes it to the absence of the moon. So he figures that out like instantly, which I thought was a bit weird,
like,
but
immediately.
And also while inside a shaft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where all that sunlight was pouring in.
Yeah.
So furious upon seeing his father's severed head, Felix heads toward the mineshaft to avenge his father's death. Book follows. Sweet quickly kills Camillo and begins a fight with Book. Book strikes first by breaking Sweet's arm, which also further shows that he's in a severely weakened state. And Sweet stuns Book with a rock, stands over him and drips blood into his eye before escaping further down the mineshaft. The shaft collapses with Sweet in it as everyone else escapes. Observing from afar the old world vampires, after feeding on Jeeks and the Blackmouth twins, because, we didn't want to go back to those characters. We don't even really know who they are. They leave and are just like, well, he's gone forever, and dust their hands of it. And they seem to do this a lot, where they're like, our work here is done. This will never come back to bite us in the ass. Skinner's fate
That's
is
why they had to leave Europe.
Yeah.
They just fucked up too many times.
They're so stupid.
Yeah. And Book appears to have been turned into another American vampire. So, the weirdo new vampire. So that's the backup story. Thoughts on this one?
Pink eye is contagious.
Yes.
Pink eye is contagious. Yes. If you have it, don't go to work. Actually, you know what? Quick PSA. It's winter where you guys are. It's summer where I am. Seasons are changing. Climate change is real. If you're sick, if you're sick, like if you're actually genuinely sick, and you can do it, and I understand that some people can't, if you can do it, fucking go to work and make other people sick. You fucking asshole. I've gotten sick so many times from people who come into the office hacking and wheezing and sputtering. Stay home, please.
And
please.
you guys
I don't want
can
to get sick.
go to a doctor and stuff over there.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to the doctor. You just have to stay home.
Like I'm saying, if you needed to, you could just go.
Oh, yeah. We can just
not
go.
like us.
No, that's what I'm saying.
You just don't have to pay for it. Like it's just the difference in prices.
Yes, exactly.
Insane.
Kieran, we have it worse.
I know.
Pink eye here makes you a vampire. That's bad.
I know. I know, and it is a serious problem, especially when it gets into the daycares. But Anyway, but back to the issue. I have one strong thought about this.
Okay.
About this particular issue. When Camillo goes into the mine and he trips on a rock, and that is ultimately kind of what kills him, I hate that. I hate when people are just going and doing something and then, they just trip on something, and then that just leads to their downfall. Because it's like, well, surely you would have been looking where you were going because you're in this incredibly dangerous situation. I did not like it. I am aware that it happens all the time. People write it all the time, and that, everything else surrounding it was perfectly fine. I hate when people trip over in stories.
Does it feel like a cop-out to you? Is that the problem?
Yes. It feels like a cop-out. Like, Sweets could have laid a trap for him, or, he could have taunted him in some way about his dad. It could have been something kind of interesting. Instead, he just trips and gets lit on fire.
Yeah.
I did not care for it.
I mean, that's how I plan to die. To trip and light myself on fire. I mean, while hunting a vampire, of course.
Well, I mean, obviously, yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Exactly.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I enjoyed it. And then I was actually literally going to turn it over to you, so just continue.
I would argue that the rock and the human kind of embody the sense of humanity doesn't matter. And it's just the little things that really set you up for the largest failures. I also thought it harkened really well to Stephen King's The Stand, where all these people, they survived this crazy super flu, right? And there's like this whole chapter in The Stand that is devoted to people dying of just bullshit circumstances. And it's just like, no big loss. This guy goes for a run because his whole family is gone. He has a heart attack in the middle of the road, And it's just like, that is the human condition, is that you are destined to die in dumb as fuck situations. And I liked that he put his little SK on this particular issue.
That's totally fair. I have not read The Stand. It sounds like I might need to. It's only like 800 or 900 pages, right?
Yeah. I listen to it every cold and flu season.
That's fair.
It is a very good book. I would recommend it. I very heartily enjoyed it.
Kieran, do you want to take issue 5?
I shall. Issue 5 is Curtain Call. 1925. Pearl Jones and Henry Preston arm themselves with wooden weapons and confront B.D. Blotch and 2 associates. They defeat the 2 with stakes, and Pearl kills B.D. Blotch by exposing him to the sun. Pearl then confronts Hattie Jones on a movie set. In a flashback, we learn that Hattie intentionally turned herself into a vampire by cutting herself with the knife she cut Pearl with in the last issue. Pearl then kills Hattie using the golden star from her dressing room door. Later, on a boardwalk, Pearl and Henry discuss their future plans. While Henry is briefly gone, Skinner Sweet approaches Pearl and tells her that he had been thinking about killing her, but changed his mind. Skinner says goodbye, but tells Pearl it won't be the last time. Henry returns, and he and Pearl begin the next stage of their lives together. Okay, so we'll just go straight into the last bit of the B story, and we'll kind of give our thoughts on the whole thing. So the B story, last part is if the right hand offend thee, cut it off. 1912. Will Bunting continues his reading of Bad Blood at a bookstore. 3 years after having been turned into a vampire, James Book struggles with his nature. He resorts to feeding on small animals to quench his thirst and hires quack doctors to try and cure him. Back in Lakeview, men hired by Mr. Percy unearth Skinner Sweet with the intention of escorting him back to Percy. Sweet kills the men and eventually finds Percy's mansion. Percy offers Sweet a deal to join Percy and the old world vampires. Sweet declines by dragging Percy into the sunlight on his lawn and killing him. Skinner leaves muttering about his plans. Book finally begs Abelina Camillo to kill him. Sorry, I actually said her name completely wrong. Book finally begs Abelina Camillo to kill him. Abelina agrees, but under the condition that Book sleeps with her that night. They make love, and Abelina shoots Book under the moonless night. Later, Abelina visits Book's gravesite with their daughter. Back at the book reading, Bunting says that Book never gave in to Sweet, and that is the happiest ending he can offer. But during a book signing, a shaken man from the audience hands Bunting a letter from Sweet that mocks Bunting and his mortality. The first story arc ends with Sweet standing outside the bookstore, and he's being watched by an older Abelina Camillo and their daughter Felicia. Apparently, the two have future plans for Skinner Sweet. Dun, dun, dun! So I think we'll get into final thoughts. Jonah, what did you think of American Vampire Volume 1? A story and B story.
A story and B story. As a whole, I enjoyed it. I would recommend it to people who like horror and are looking for, or like vampire stuff in general and are looking for something a little bit different, because it does play with the tropes in interesting ways. One of the things I had mentioned earlier was how we see the first weakness being different is the moonless night being when they're weakened. And this one we see that it's gold instead of silver. That is also a thing they're weak against. I don't know if they've explicitly said silver. It works on the European vampires. But that is a pretty common weakness that vampires have in other things I've seen. It allows them to do things like, make bullets out of silver that work on werewolves and vampires. I don't know. There's the Del Toro vampire books / show that silver's like a big thing in those. So that makes me think it's a normal lore thing.
Yeah. It's also a pretty big one in True Blood as well.
Is
so
it?
The Siggy
Okay.
Stackhouse. That's a big one as well. But yeah, I mean, silver is a huge thing. That's why people wear the silver crosses, right? Because it protects you from vampires.
Yes. And this also has speaking of the cross not being a thing, is the also super amazing one-liner where he's like, turns into Ricky Gervais for a panel and is like, have I mentioned I'm an atheist?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Are you offended?
Now, I'm curious, is it his American vampireness or is it his atheism that makes the cross not work? I mean, I'm asking. But no, overall, I did really like it. The art was cool. The one thing I really, really, really did not like was in this ending chapter where the younger girl is like begging the old man that's her godfather to sleep with her. That was real yucky, Stephen King. Mr. King, I think me and you need to have a little talk after class. Inappropriate. So I'm going to pass it off to Veronica and get your final thoughts on the book.
I feel like this was a final issue about progeny. And so we have Skinner Sweet, who chooses not to kill his progeny. And why? We don't know. Maybe he's going to have like some kind of a sick relationship with her, like Lestat has with Louis. Maybe not. Who knows? But he clearly has a progeny that he is going to do something with. And then, of course, we have a Van Helsing-esque Slayer coming along. And I think that's why, and I think it was a route that they used, why they made this the goddaughter was so weird. You're so totally correct. But like, there was such a great opportunity for there to be this like, oh no, we are Slayers and we are born from these Pinkerton vampire hunters, you know? So cool. Such a weird moment though.
Yeah. Could have been handled very differently and been much cooler. But I'm curious to see moving forward, because I mean, obviously this has lots of volumes that we haven't dug into. If her being born of a person that was one of these new vampires will give her crazy powers. Like, I'm actually interested to see where they go with the daughter. It's just, her conception was a little bit not a little bit. It was a lot bit icky, and I did not need that there. Yeah. Kieran?
Overall, like we've read a lot of comics for the show, and you know, there have been some that I'm like, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind, you know, going back to that, or, you know, this kind of makes me want to check out this other thing, blah, blah, blah. This is probably one of the few that I've bought digitally. Just the first volume. And I probably will actually get the first volume in print, and I'll probably pick up another couple of volumes because I'm actually genuinely interested to see what is going to happen in the story, and kind of how they're going to develop this vampire mythos that they have been developing in this kind of first volume. I'm curious to see where it goes, because it's just genuinely interesting. And I think, you know, they, as I said before in the previous issue where Sweets like kills the whole town, it's a really cool kind of combination of like a setting or a genre plus vampires. And, you know, it sounds dumb, but it totally works. The art's really great.
It's like Cowboys and Aliens, you know, just throw two things together and it works every time, right?
Yeah, that movie was flawless from what I hear.
It was a comic first. I didn't know if you knew that.
Oh, okay. Oh. Damn. But yeah, so it is an interesting setting, and it is, I will say, on the whole, well written. I'm not saying it's like a literary masterpiece the entire way through or anything like that, but it does do a good job of like moving the story along, making some interesting characters, and some of the quips and like one-liners are kind of cheesy, but in like a fun way. But I do totally agree. The whole thing where she's like, I know that I'm your goddaughter, but I love you the way a man loves. Like, it's just like, no. We could have done anything else, and we could have still had the same result where there's like a daughter or whatever from this Pinkerton vampire slayer. We didn't need to do this.
And even he didn't want to do it. He was just like, no, girl, this is not what I want.
Yeah.
What I want is for you to kill me.
and it's so fucking weird that eventually he's like, okay, I will like put a baby in you if you shoot me in the head afterwards. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
I don't want this.
It was bad. It was real bad.
And never once did either of them be like, oh, but what if this baby turns out to be a little like you?
Yeah. That's not brought up in any way, which I thought
what
was
if she eats through my tum-tum?
Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen all 17 Twilight films. I don't remember how many there actually were. And
too many. There were 5.
There was 5. Okay.
Yes.
And we all know that pregnancy is really hard, especially when the baby is part vampire. So,
exactly.
If there's one thing we learned from Twilight, it's that. And also that Forks is never going to be the same again because of tourism. But that's neither here nor there. But I think it's a pretty good, strong recommend from all three of us, right?
Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
I'd say so.
Well, that will bring us to the end of the show. So, Veronica, why don't you tell people where they can find you online and you have a show you might want to, throw out there?
Absolutely. You can listen and watch me do all the bullshit on Twitter at Typical Veronica. You can find my podcast, Cthulhu and Friends, at CAF Podcast. If you are interested in what lies beneath and in the dark shadows, we are exploring that with 4 cast members who are silly enough to allow me to lead them into the darkness to discover what it is to be human and what it is to be meanemless.
Interesting. All right. Karen, where can people find you?
You can feed. God damn it.
You can also find him on my podcast.
That's true, actually. Yeah, I'll make sure to mention that. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Mr. K_Bennett. You can also check out my Dungeons and Dragons podcast. That is for Crits and Giggles. That is at for CNG Podcast. You can also find me in prologue number 1 or episode 3 of Cthulhu and Friends, playing Leo, the owner of the what's the diner called?
Divine Bovine.
The Divine Bovine Diner. Yeah. So I think that's a good role. I like it. It's fun.
Excellent.
Johnny, where can people find you?
Oh, man, you can find me all over Twitter. Twitter.com/ at whatever. I don't remember how they actually list those. It's at Spambot. I'm Spambot. It's not where you report spam. As many people have learned the hard way. And you can also find me on our Twitch channels, about once a week or so. I've been trying to stream for our Patreon people some comic book related video games. So last weekend, I started up the X-Men Origins Wolverine, the movie, the game for PS2. And it's, pretty standard brawler, but it's surprisingly kind of fun. I have some way worse looking ones that I'm actually kind of itching to get to just to see how bad they are. Like Fantastic Four, the first movie that they did, the game for PS2.
Wow. Okay.
So, I'm going to try and muscle my way through that. And then I have
choice
some good
you're making.
I have some good stuff too that's more modern, but some of this old licensed games are pretty primo for streaming content. Otherwise you can check out this post-show thingy that Logan will edit in, where one of us will tell you all about all the places you can find information about the show right now.
Need more mutants, metahumans, and monsters in your life? Then check out these other Geekling shows like Transformation Sequence, Cthulhu and Friends, and Drunks and Dragons. Help us make the show the best that it can be by supporting us at patreon.com/inksandissues, where you can get bonus content, early access to episodes, and can even vote on comics for us to review. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review to help us spread the word. Interact with us on Twitter at inksandissues or on Twitch at twitch.tv/inksandissues. Now do yourself a favor and go read some gosh dang comics.
And with that, we will see you all next time. What a great outro. I know, wasn't that good? And with that, we'll see you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
So long, partner.